Hey guys, how's it going? Hopefully you are all doing very well, and today we have got another tutorial on the channel where today we're going to be covering something very important, which is going to be how to cover the passing lanes. Now this is a super important thing you need to really get a grasp of if you want to become a top level player. If you're someone who's a gold player, want to get to an elite player for example, this is definitely a skill, one of a few key skills that you're going to need to really try and master, and that's something that is really going to take your game of FIFA to the next level. So first up, going into the basics, we've got to learn the basics of covering the passing lanes. Now here we've got a prime example of what we are talking about covering the passing lanes. So what we mean is we're trying to cover inside the passing lanes where the pass we think is most likely going to go. Now I've drawn a simple example here with the red arrow being where most people would likely try and pass the ball, even though there is somebody even though we do have somebody covering the passing lanes, most people would still try and pass it there because obviously it is a snap-second decision, and you don't quite think about it in this sort of detail obviously when you slow it down, but that's when most people would try and play that pass. They try and force a pass out there, whereas the blue arrow which I've drawn on now that obviously you've slowed it down, it's much easier to see, but that is where the top level players would pass that ball, or they would maybe just put their foot on the ball, do some LB dribbling and then some strafe dribbling, and then they would move on with the play. So when you think about it, when you slow it down, that's what it looks like. But as I mentioned, you can see that we do have a player right in front of that passing lane, so there's a good chance that we are going to be able to intercept that ball. And you can see when we do play it on, that's exactly what happens. We then do intercept the pass very easily. So now going into a couple of common mistakes that you might come across, obviously maybe something that you might come across when you are doing this at the moment. A couple of examples of using this incorrectly. Now you can see this first example. We've got Van Dijk, who is the player that we are controlling right at the moment. You can see on the green arrow, he is right on the correct passing lane. So at the moment, all looks well. Now, what we actually didn't see on this particular attack is our other centre-back, which was Varane, and you can see that he is quite a way off Mbappe. So when covering passing lanes, it's not necessarily about just covering passing lanes. It's now we're getting into, you sometimes need to be man-marking the player because you will not always be able to get in the way of a passing lane. Sometimes it just won't be possible. You can see if we're already controlling Van Dijk, who is on a passing lane, you can't possibly have two players. So sometimes it's then about switching to get the other player to be man-marking the man. So he's just, when he turns, you're just able to boom, tackle him. And you can see on this example, that's not what we've done. You can see that Varane obviously is way off Mbappe. We can't get there to cover the passing lane, but he's too far off, so he's not doing anything. And eventually you can see when we do continue on the clip, he passes it to Mbappe, and then Mbappe does finish and we don't switch well enough. Straight into another example, and again it's something else that will probably come across when you are doing this. You can see this time around we are controlling completely the wrong play. You can see Aguero in the back where the red arrow is. He's making that run in behind, and you can see just in front of that we're controlling, I believe it is Jimenez, and you can see just right on the ball we've got Alan, who is right there, and all we have to do is just switch to Alan. This is nothing to do with about the run that Aguero is making. We just switch into that Alan midfielder, he's going to be able to tackle Ronaldo. He's less than half a yard away from him, so this is just about switching, and obviously switching is something that you are going to have to get better at, but that's a whole different kettle of fish in itself. But you do have to get better at switching as well, and that's going to be something that's really going to take your game to the next level if you can really try and improve your switching game as well as improving your passing lanes. You can see he just chips the ball over the top to Aguero. Aguero is able to get him behind, and that is a great finish in the end. And then another prime example of just not being able to close down those positions well enough. You can see this time around we've got, I think it's Neymar on the ball. You can see Kante is right there. We're already way off him at the moment. Now sometimes you're not going to be able to press your opponent, so pressing is not always possible, and that's where cutting passing lanes or getting touch tight, man marking your players is the next best thing you can do. So obviously in this occasion we can't press him because we're way off him. So what we could have done is we were too late at switching to Neymar in this example. You can see that he's just about to pass the ball to Zidane, and again we're just a way off, so we're not going to be able to cut that passing lane. So what the best bet we can do is try and get touch tight to Zidane, so when he does receive the ball we can then tackle him immediately, and then you can see what happens. We just get there too late. He plays a quick give and go, gets in with Zidane. Unfortunately we were able to make the tackle and then clear the danger. So now when we talk about using this correctly, now we've seen a couple of examples of how it's being used incorrectly. Now we can see a lot of examples in the next couple of minutes of some examples of it working correctly. This time around Kante is there to be able to intercept that pass. A little simple pass, easy to read. Kante is then able to intercept that pass, and then it does end up resulting in a goal. And that's the key. It's just being able to anticipate. That's where a lot of this comes from. It's being able to anticipate what your opponent's doing, and this is a prime example of anticipating what your opponent's going to do. Again, you can see another example of the red arrow where most people try and pass this just to the right. It's a simple, easy pass, and again, it's very easy to see these passes when you do slow it down. But the thing is about recording your gameplay is you're able to see some of the mistakes you make a lot easier. When you're in the game, sometimes the game's playing quick and you can't see the errors of your ways. And you can see the blue arrow is where probably when you've seen it and slowed it down, that's the simple pass that you should be making. And you can see this guy does try and force the pass inside, and we jump the lane absolutely perfectly with Jordi Alba. And that's the main thing you have to, I think, take away from this video, is it's all about anticipation. You've really got to try and just practice anticipating. You've got to get into the mind of, if that was you, where would you pass the ball? And you can see that so many times we're making these challenges and sometimes it's resulting in goals. And that's the clear thing. You've got to get into the mind of your opponent. You've got to think, if this was me, where would I be passing the ball? And that's where you have to try and place your player. And you'll see in some examples, sometimes the pass doesn't come. Sometimes your opponent will see that you're covering the lane and he won't pass the ball, but that's fine. That's what you want him to do. You want him to change what he's going to do. If you can't intercept the pass, the next best thing that you can do is try and force him to change the way he plays. But ultimately, just trying to be one step ahead of your opponent, trying to be a proactive defender rather than a reactive defender. I think a lot of people in this game sometimes will be chasing with a midfielder or something, and that's fine, because at the end of the day, what happens is you kind of let the AI defend for you. But ultimately, if you try and let the AI defend for you, you're always kind of a one step behind. The amount of attacks you're going to concede are always going to be a hell of a lot more than if you do try and learn how to do this sort of method. Trying to be a proactive defender means that basically you want to just try and get one step ahead rather than being one step behind. When you let the AI defend for you all the time, you're not able to jump in the way of passing lanes because you're constantly just controlling one player and you're letting the AI move for you. So learning this method really is going to help you probably clear up a lot of attacks that you might be conceding at the moment. It's all about being aggressive as well, trying to be a bit of an aggressive defender, but there's the difference between being an aggressive defender, which we have done a video on. You want to be an aggressive defender, but you don't want to be a careless defender. You don't want to constantly just be trying to jump into tackles and things, and jumping into lanes constantly. You do have to take calculated risks and know when you can jump in front of lanes, when you can jump into tackles. And you've seen plenty of examples of us using this very, very effectively. This time around, we did manage to get a penalty, from that tackle from Frankie de Jong, intercepting that pass. But ultimately, it's just about being calm, being composed, not letting your head go. That's one of the key things about being good at FIFA. That's one thing that you'll see with FIFA is learning this sort of a method is you'll see the better players are more composed players. And there's no one, you don't see any pros or top level players shouting and screaming. I know it's very difficult because this game does get the best of us, the best of all of us at times. And it's not about not raging or not getting frustrated, because the game will frustrate, but it's about trying to keep your head and trying to keep a level head. And that's one thing that's going to stop you from making, rash decisions when you're defending, and, clouding your judgment when it comes to obviously trying to make certain tackles and intercept certain passing lanes. So hopefully this video has helped you out. Hopefully it's maybe cleared a few things up, how to become a little bit more successful, and maybe some of the pitfalls you might come across when encountering this method and trying to make this method as successful as possible. So if you did find this video useful, please do subscribe. Make sure you drop a thumbs up on the video as well if you do want to see more. But that is all for today, guys. Have an awesome day. I'm out.